hopes stem for DACA deal as lawmakers battle over Trump's immigration remarks. Washington, after 3 days of denunciations from around the world, President Trump declared that he is not a racist on Sunday, even as the uproar over his vulgar remarks on immigration overshadowed critical issues facing the Capitol, including efforts to protect young undocumented immigrants and avert a government shutdown. Mr. Trump also insisted that he had not made the inflammatory comments in a White House meeting on Thursday, part of a newly aggressive defense and a counterattack on Democrats by the president and his allies. But his remarks on Sunday were a departure from the White House's initial statement last week, which did not deny the comments. "I'm not a racist," Mr. Trump said on Sunday night as he arrived at Trump International Golf Club in Florida for dinner with Representative Kevin McCarthy of California, the majority leader, who attended the meeting last week and has not spoken publicly about it. "I am the least racist person you have ever interviewed, that I can tell you." His comments, while extraordinary coming from a President of the United States, echoed reassurances Mr. Trump has made several times before. Earlier Sunday, Mr. Trump declared on Twitter that the Obama-era program shielding young undocumented immigrants from deportation was probably dead, while a Republican senator who attended the Thursday meeting where the president discussed immigration denied that Mr. Trump had used the word shithole in describing African nations. The senator, David Perdue of Georgia, also accused another participant in the White House meeting, Senator Richard J. Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, of a gross misrepresentation of what the president had said at the session. Mr. Perdue and another Republican senator at the meeting, Tom Cotton of Arkansas, had previously said they did not recall the president saying these comments specifically. But by Sunday, their recollections appeared to have sharpened, and Mr. Cotton joined Mr. Perdue in disputing Mr. Durbin's account. The two senators' latest assertions also seemed to conflict with the account of another Republican senator who was at the meeting, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Mr. Trump alluded to those two senators on Sunday night when asked about his immigration remarks. "Did you see what various senators in the room said about my comments?" the president asked. "They weren't made." The rift over Mr. Trump's comments, and how they have since been recounted, risked further eroding trust between Democrats and Republicans at the beginning of a critical week for Congress. Government funding is set to expire on Friday, and lawmakers will need to pass a stopgap spending measure to avoid a government shutdown on Saturday. And lawmakers are already facing a difficult fight over the politically volatile subject of immigration, with the fates of hundreds of thousands of young immigrants hanging in the balance. Adding to the uncertain picture for those immigrants, the Trump administration resumed accepting renewals for the program over the weekend, under orders from a federal judge who is hearing a legal challenge to Mr. Trump's dismantling of the program. But in Congress, the battle took on an increasingly personal dimension as Mr. Perdue and Mr. Cotton essentially accused Mr. Durbin of lying about the president's comments, even after the vulgar remarks were widely reported and the White House did not immediately dispute that the president had made them. "I didn't hear that word either," Mr. Cotton said on CBS's Face the Nation. "And I was sitting no further away from Donald Trump than Dick Durbin was." Mr. Cotton said Mr. Durbin has a history of misrepresenting what happens in White House meetings, an assertion that Mr. Perdue made in his own interview Sunday morning on ABC's This Week. Ben Martyr, a spokesman for Mr. Durbin, responded by suggesting that Mr. Perdue and Mr. Cotton should not be believed. "Credibility is something that's built by being consistently honest over time," Mr. Martyr wrote on Twitter. "Senator Durbin has it. Senator Perdue does not. Ask anyone who's dealt with both." Mr. Graham had previously told a fellow South Carolina Republican, Senator Tim Scott, that reports in the news media of Mr. Trump's language were basically accurate. A spokesman for Mr. Graham did not respond to a request for comment on Sunday. Senator Jeff Flake, an Arizona Republican who is part of a bipartisan group of senators that has developed an immigration proposal, said on Sunday that people in the room with Mr. Trump during Thursday's meeting told him that the president had used the inflammatory language. "I was in a meeting directly afterwards where those who had presented to the president our proposal spoke about the meeting," he said on This Week. "I heard that account before the account even went public." The other lawmakers at the meeting, all Republicans, had not offered any public recollection of what the president said. The Homeland Security Secretary, Kirstjen Nielsen, who also attended the meeting, said on Fox News Sunday that she did not recall the president saying that exact phrase. Mr. Durbin had told reporters on Friday that Mr. Trump called African nations shitholes, which Mr. Durbin said was the exact word used by the president, not just once, but repeatedly. He called the president's comments hate-filled, violent, racist. At the meeting, Mr. Durbin said Mr. Trump also questioned whether the United States needed more Haitians. Mr. Graham is said to have admonished the president during the meeting, telling him that America is an idea, not a race. Mr. Trump has a notable style when it comes to professing that he does not harbor prejudice. In 2015, Mr. Trump declared in a television interview that he was probably the least racist person on earth. Last year, at a White House news conference, he insisted he was the least anti-Semitic person that you've ever seen in your entire life, as well as the least racist person. The Obama-era program shields from deportation young immigrants who were brought to the United States illegally as children, known as Dreamers. Saying that President Barack Obama had exceeded his authority when he created the program, Mr. Trump moved to end it in September. He gave Congress 6 months to find a fix for the program, called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA. Democrats have been pushing to secure a deal by Friday's government funding deadline that would protect Dreamers, hoping to capitalize on the leverage they have as a result of that deadline. Democratic votes will be needed to pass the stopgap spending measure in the Senate, where government funding measures require 60 votes, and Democratic votes might also be needed in the House. Republican leaders say they want to address DACA as well, but separately from funding the government. Compared with their Democratic counterparts, Republican leaders are operating on a longer time frame for taking action, given the 6-month window that Mr. Trump gave Congress. They also have to contend with internal divisions over immigration policy. The bipartisan group of senators, including Mr. Durbin and Mr. Graham, reached an agreement last week that would provide a path to citizenship for DACA recipients while also providing money for border security and making other changes to immigration policy. But Mr. Trump dismissed the proposal, calling it a big step backwards. And on Sunday, he offered a pessimistic take on Twitter, writing that DACA was probably dead and blaming Democrats. He kept up the finger-pointing when he spoke to reporters on Sunday night. "We're ready, willing and able to make a deal on DACA, but I don't think the Democrats want to make a deal," Mr. Trump said. "And the folks from DACA should know the Democrats are the ones that aren't going to make a deal." Still, administration officials said they intended to abide by an order from Judge William Alsup of Federal District Court in San Francisco last week to restart the DACA program, with some modifications, while a legal challenge plays out. On Saturday, officials did just that by updating a government website to say that renewal requests were once again being accepted. But administration officials hope the judge's decision will be temporary. Officials said the president's lawyers are examining whether to appeal the order, which could lead to a ruling allowing the administration to shut the program down again. The administration could also choose to modify its legal reasoning to satisfy the judge's criticisms. Either way, immigrant rights activists are not counting on legal action to be the ultimate protection for the Dreamers. Several said they believe the only real solution for the hundreds of thousands of young immigrants is to convince Congress to act soon. The court ruling could lessen the pressure for that kind of action, at least in the short term, since some young immigrants can once again renew their protected status for another 2 years. Lawyers and directors of community legal services spent Sunday preparing fact sheets and answering calls that have been flooding their offices. Most of the calls that Hassan Shafiqullah, the director of the Immigration Unit of the Legal Aid Society of New York,
Vợ chồng Bình Minh đi ăn lúc nửa đêm sau khi từ Hàn Quốc trở về. Sau chuyến công tác hâm nóng tình cảm, cặp đôi vui vẻ đi ăn cùng nhau. Sau một tuần công tác tại Hàn Quốc, vợ chồng Bình Minh đến thành phố Hồ Chí Minh lúc 1 giờ 15 sáng ngày 14 tháng 1. Cặp đôi mặc tông sệt tông trắng, mang phong cách thể thao. Chuyến bay của cặp đôi bị hoãn nên vì muộn hơn 2 tiếng đồng hồ so với dự kiến. Do khá mệt mỏi nên vợ nam diễn viên nhanh chóng lấy hành lý rồi ra xe về. Mới đây vợ chồng Bình Minh được mời sang Hàn Quốc để tham gia lễ rước đuốc, quảng bá cho thể phận hồi mùa đông. 2018, anh Thơ đã cùng chồng đồng hành. Cuối năm 2016, một số hình ảnh thân mật của Bình Minh và Trương Quỳnh Anh xuất hiện trên mạng xã hội. Lần dấy lên nghi án cả hai bí mật cặp kè, trong khi hai nhân vật chính đều im lặng thì anh Thơ bà xã của Bình Minh lại khá bình thản. Cô cho rằng đó là hình ảnh liên quan đến bộ phim chung mà chồng đóng cùng Trương Quỳnh Anh. Anh Thơ không quan tâm đến tin đồn và khẳng định gia đình vẫn bình thường. Khuya qua, sau khi rời khỏi sân bay, vợ chồng Bình Minh ghé một tiệm ăn bên lề đường để ăn lót dạ. Vài ngày tới, Bình Minh cùng ekip sang Canada quảng bá cho bộ phim Giấc mơ Mỹ, còn anh Thơ sẽ có chuyến công tác tại Australia.